this is a time where we get to unpack and interrogate the issues for the day. And we're doubling down on the nationwide protest embarked upon by the organized labor to drive home their demands and to drive home that message that Nigerians need something that would cushion the effect and the impact of subsidy removal vis-a-vis the incremental rise in the pump price of PMS across the country, which has ultimately affected the inflation figures in the country. If you take a look at commodity prices, as well as all the other attendant consequences of the removal of fuel subsidies. So to help us navigate some of these issues today, we're joined via Zoom by Comrade Isa Aremu. He's the Director General of Michael Imodu National Institute for Labor Studies at Ilorin Center in Kwara State. He's joined us via Zoom. Hello, Comrade. Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us on Daybreak. Hello, Comrade. Do we have a... Okay, while we're working on that audio, just a quick reminder that we will be unpacking the issues around the national...
Are you hearing me now?
Yes, we can hear you now, Comrade. Thank you very much for joining us on Daybreak on Trust TV.
Are you hearing me now?
Yes, we can hear you, Comrade. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well. Good morning, your viewers.
All right, thank you very much. Let's first of all get your take on the takeaways from yesterday's protest. Did, in your view, the protest achieve its desired objective, especially in light of the meeting the organized labor had with the president after the protest?
Yes, I think, well, from your coverage, and I watched the tapes, throughout the country, as reported by your crew, I think it is clear that organized labor made a point to express the feelings, of Nigerian workers as citizens over the impact of the policy of subsidy removal on the cost of living, on inflation, cost of food, as you ably articulated. I mean, it was also clear that it was a peaceful protest, peaceful rally throughout the country. And you can see that labor is actually an integrative movement. Labor promotes unity around developmental issues, and for a country that occasionally is always put under strains, on account of our so-called fault lines of religion and ethnicity, identity. I think, for one, it was refreshing that labor brought everybody together along issues that are inclusive, about development. They need to improve the pay of the working people. They need to fix refineries. They need to stop corruption. They need to cut down the cost of living. Those are the issues that you hardly hear among the political class. They talk more of dividing offices rather than issue of governance. So I want to commend the organized labor for living up to the tradition, which have been laid before. Don't forget that I used to be the vice president of Nigeria Labour Congress, and we have been in this struggle for quite some time. So it's also important that we had contestation, and it also ended up with some level of cooperation at the end of the day. I'm quite excited that after the rallies, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, in line with his democratic traditions, is very homely, with protests, also homely with engagement. He met with the president of Nigeria Labour Congress, Comrade Joe Ajero, as well as president of TUC, Festus Osifo. And they came out with good commitment that it was time now for us to address the issue of how to improve on the pay of the workers, both minimum and living wages. President also agreed to also make sure that the framework for negotiation is restructured in a way that labor will be better dignified. And I think this time around, I hope is the Secretary to Federal Government that will be leading the discussion on the part of the government, not from advisors to the president.
Comrade, from your experience.
So what I want to say here is that I think to a large extent, we can say that the goal of the protest has been achieved. What matters is that after the negotiation, both the government and organized labor have agreed to resume back for enhanced social dialogue in a very robust and mutually rewarding way.
Yeah. Okay.
So for me, it's progress that has been made. It's also celebration of democratic process, freedom of association, freedom of assembly. The rally was peaceful.
If I can just chip in here, what are the tangibles? Yes. Because away from the symbolic as well as perhaps maybe theatrical expression of will and commitment to fight for Nigerian workers, what are the tangibles for Nigerians who are still going to go about their business struggling, still dealing with the difficulty as a result of all these issues that the organized labor is agitating for? What are the tangibles that we can say this is substantially what the protest has achieved, or this meeting with the president has achieved for Nigerians? From your experience, is it safe to say that Nigerians should not start counting their chickens at this moment until they hatch? Because obviously the protest is one thing, the meeting with the president is another, but there is nothing practical right now that Nigerians can say, let's take this as a victory as far as this whole conversation is concerned.
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, whether it would be right to say it's theoretical or it's just symbolic. No. I also don't think we should be talking of defeat and victory. No, it's policy engagement. It's policy engagement, which is very, very significant. I think the point organized labor has made is that humans are important. Yes, you can have policy reform, undoubtedly, but you don't need to deform your people, whether in terms of pay, whether in terms of worsening poverty. I think that's not just symbolic. The point was made yesterday. But even before then, don't forget that once the organized labor gave the notice of protest, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu also addressed the nation on August 1st. And as I've said before, for that address, provided the background for serious engagement, which I thought could have been the best way to even do so in engagement with labor. But nonetheless, we had the national broadcast, very comprehensive enough. If you look at that broadcast, there are tangibles there, concretely. First, in terms of even, for President to regret, to more or less apologize that there was a time lag between the time the policy was announced and the palliative measures that were to be put in place. He also rolled out a number of measures which include credit, a single digit rate for the number of companies, so that they can revive production and possibly create jobs. And of course, one of the commitments yesterday, which is one takeaway from what I already communicated of the NSA and TUC with the issue out, is that we have now been giving also the deadline. Definitely, when Port Harcourt refinery will come on board. One of the critical issues Labour is raising is that how can we be having an import-driven, deregulation process? It's time for us to revive the legacy refineries. We can talk about to manage them, not the old way. We can work at the LNG model in which you have private-public partnership. The Islo refinery was not contained in the president's speech, but now, after the engagement with Labour, so it's clear now that we can't ignore that, and this is what concrete tangible. Then the president also says so that your salary will be reviewed soonest, but it's not an award; it has to be negotiated. Because nothing is sustainable if it is not negotiated, and there's a tradition in that respect for me, which is quite significant. I hope Labour will be able to build on that, because I know what it used to take us to review minimum wage in the past. Now everybody knew that at $34 per month, there is complete collapse of minimum wage, of wages in general.
All right.
And the only way to revive it is for you to make sure that you negotiate up review of wages. So for me, this is beyond symbolism. There are really tangibles to be taken away. And the last one, since you talk of one takeaway, the one takeaway is that for the future, you must, when you are carrying out a reform, we have to avoid a kind of big bang approach to reform. We need to space reform. We need to engage, because if you don't engage now, you need to engage much more later. Then secondly, there's the principle of what they call just transition. We are moving from a policy of regulated market with respect to petroleum products to that of liberalization of wholesale, what they call market forces. You must be able to work out a template. How long when are we going to move, and what will be the benefit for everybody? It is clear that the way we carry out the removal of subsidy, why not because of labor intervention, it was becoming a zero-sum game in which only marketers seems to be the winner, while the citizens, are paying high for petroleum products.
Comrade, if I may.
That's impacted on cost of living. So I think that principle of just transition, that means transition that is fair, in which all citizens benefit from reform, the point has also been brought home very eloquently.
All right.
So I think that we can only improve on this process,
all right,
to enhance social dialogue. Yeah.
Okay, comrade, if I may interject at this point. For me, and I'm sure for many other Nigerians, I'm still struggling to see other than just promises. I clearly understand you don't like some of the choice of the words that were used, but when we begin to interrogate some of the things the president said in his remark and some of this, they are not things that can happen in a month. Even the salary negotiations you talk about is still ongoing, whilst people are bearing this hardship, and it's getting worse by the day. As you would know, as somebody who has kept track of this sector for a long time, if prices of petrol move from what it is today, around $82, $86 per barrel, to anywhere around 95 or 100 per barrel, these prices will further go up. I have not seen any statement from Labour or the presidency to be able to contain these market forces that we all talked about, to be able to contain the shock that would always come up from these market vagaries. These are the kind of things that will happen in the next 30 to 60 days. We are talking about a refinery completion that is looking at December. That's some 5 months away. We are talking about fertilizers for planting season that is practically over. We are talking about buses that have not been procured there, so they are not yet on the street. For the average Nigerian, do you think it's enough to just say we shall, which is the language that we have used for so long, and that is why most people don't trust this process anyway? Isn't there anything we can do with some of the savings we have made from this exchange rate devaluations and the subsidy removal to immediately cushion the impact of these things, of the sufferings that we currently see in our society?
Yeah, well, precisely. That's why, what is first of all significant is that after the rallies and the protests, I think Labour now has enhanced audience, with the government to resume negotiation. And those are the issues that will definitely come on board about how do we quickly have the lower hanging measures in place. And you can't deny that the president offered as many as 3,000 buses that will be bought. Even the organized labor has raised the point that should be increased further. I don't think there will be much delay over that one to get going. about providing buses, make available, even though I would have prefer that they all produce in Nigeria so that we can create jobs, from the standpoint of organized labor. I had the president of TUC telling the Senate that buy innocent, buy locally assembled products so that we don't continue also using this money to turn the economies around abroad while we're importing unemployment. I think that would be a quick one to be done as the case may be. I also know that there have been a lot of discussions within the National Minimum Wage Commission. The National Wage Commission had run a lot some scenarios about what they call petroleum subsidy allowance, the cost of living allowance. This is not the time to walk the talk and roll out. But also we must have also avoid the pitfall of the same policy big bank, and then we have a response big bank, that will not be sustainable. As far as I'm concerned, I do believe we should talk of wage awards. Wage awards, it's easier for president to say we're going to give 200,000 per month as minimum wage and also, but in reality, it's difficult for you to get implemented. You award the way you are, if you award cheaply, so you can even withdraw cheaply. I think everything has to be negotiated, in a way that we look at the numbers, ability to pay, the cost of living. It's also important to improve pay, but not at the expense of jobs. Don't forget that many private employers, they are barely surviving, and they're also supposed to respect any agreement that have been worked out. So I think we need to look at the issues thoroughly. But everybody now knows their sense of urgency. The president also says so as much as he knows, he feels the pain. He knows what people are going through, and he wasn't trying to conceal it, the facts. So it's now important to get going. And I'm happy that the cabinet is almost getting in shape now. So that will be the first task, that the cabinet, more than ever before, has enough jobs cut out for them to address the yearnings of the people.
Okay.
But
Comrade,
I think one tangible thing out of this is that
the administration
humans matter in any reform process that we carry out. Yeah.
As far as timing is concerned, because the pronouncement was made on day one, and this was 2 months ago now. And for a lot of Nigerians, in 2 months, there would have been something that perhaps if the administration is that committed to really pacifying Nigerians or mitigating the effects of subsidy removal between May 29, 2023 to date, something would have at least kick-started in earnest to ensure that, listen, the government is really treating this with the urgency that it requires. But I'd like you to also weigh in on how the subnationals, for instance, are dealing with this particular situation, because in our reporting across the Federation, several states you go to, there are other suggestions. In Lagos, for instance, they want something as a stopgap, 30,000 naira to be paid to workers to address the effect of subsidy removal until something a lot more tangible is agreed to, pending the review of a new minimum wage. And in several other states also, there are several demands that some of these unions have placed before their state government, because this is not just a federal government issue. The states are also involved, and those negotiations are also ongoing at the state level. What is your take on that, and how do we synchronize so much so that people across board are attended to in a very substantial manner?
Well, it's fine. I mean, I'm happy that you also know that the issue is not just at the federal level, it's at the state level, it's at the local government level. But even back to the federal, you also, if I can read the mood of the federal government, and well articulated initially by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, he was even eager to roll out the palliatives, the controversial 8,000 naira, conditional transfer. I mean, it's left for the administration. It ought to have been immediate. But, there was also national uproar, a lot of different perspectives that may not be the way to go. which made the government to also say, let's slow down, even though in principle, I disagree with those who say that palliative, conditional transfer is wrong. That's completely wrong. We're living in a market economy. You have to pay in the market. You need money. Money has conditional transfer. If 8,000 is too small,
what do you mean
no, let me learn. If 8,000 is too small, you can negotiate furthermore.
Because you have,
But as you said, I've seen a lot of activism. Can I round up?
The governors were the first to say the rollout is scandalous because the database itself is fraught with a lot of issues. This was at the NEC meeting when the vice president was deliberating with the 36 state governors across the country. So I don't understand what you mean by your statement earlier, because it is not just opinion molders that are saying that. It is people in power, people in government, the governors that are saying that this social register is corrupt.
It doesn't matter. Wait, it doesn't matter. But you also know that there have been a lot of amendments to even that also dismissal of the integrity of the social register. There have been alternative views. And I think from what we are seeing at the states now, it is clear that Nigeria has come a long way in terms of keeping data, of register of those that are vulnerable who need to be well supported. And I think that's also one takeaway from this contestation. I think we need to talk together with each other. Nigerians increasingly, because of the level of crisis, we talk at each other. We're impatient. We want to polarize. We want to weaponize every debate rather than looking at having an eye on the ball. From what I've seen, let me take an example of Kwara State, for instance. Kwara State has announced 10,000 naira, for all civil servants until the new minimum wage, national minimum wage is put in. Fantastic. They are using road social register, which they have. They also talk of series of palliatives for vulnerables. Some of the data they have built over the years with UNDP, with UNICEF, So what I'm saying here is that I think the more reason why we must even widen the discussion further. Labour has set the tone, they're engaging with the federal government, but I would be happy that we expand the scope, for more robust discussion to include state government so that all stakeholders are carried out. Even private sector employers, they're also organizing Nigeria Employer Consultative Association, because all of us have to be on the same page, to cope with the current economic crisis. It's not easy to talk of the ease of doing business, but it is clear now the ease of living, the ease of working is even far more significant. So the bottom line is that everybody knows it can be business as usual, that you can't carry out policy reform that will not be accompanied with necessary measures to mitigate them. Even on the issue of price of petrol, I think you also have to see, even in the present address, for the first time, we could see a policy shift from the old, say, neoliberal policy of market forces. He assessed, so he said, when it's significant, I will intervene. I will intervene. That's a window, for engagement further. He said, when it's significant, he will intervene, not only on the issue of price of petrol, but even on the foreign exchange. You try to float the exchange rate, although they don't say floating now. You want to close the gap, and I think Naira crashed furthermore. In relation to dollar, with all the implication for production locally, you can't allow that to continue. So there's a gap between. There's the realities between the theories of policy propaganda for us by the IMF and the World Bank. That the state have no business in business. But it is clear in reality, when business collapses, it is the state that you call upon to come and to manage the process.
Right,
so I think
thank you very much.
My take on this is that let there be continuous policy engagement. And Labour has made that point. This is policy engagement, not about regime change, not about who is performing, who's not performing. No, it's about how to get Nigeria, back to work.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much, Comrade, for providing those perspectives. I like the fact that you said that whilst we keep our gaze on ease of doing business, the ease of living and working is also very important. And that sounded very typical of you in your days as as a labor leader. You continue to be anyway, even though wearing a different cap right now. We've been talking with Comrade Issa Aremu, the Director General of the Michael Imodu National Institute for Labor Studies, Manil in Ilorin. It's a pleasure to have had you join us in the studio this morning.
Thank you very much for providing the platform for this enlightenment. You are doing very well. I wish I could have joined you at the studio, but next time, if I have all the time, I will be there.
The execution of the conversation would have been much better if you were here. Thank you so much for coming.
Okay.